VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, Edinburgh City Walking Tour, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guest Ava Forsyth.
All right, my fellow friends in the blind community, you are in the VocalEye Almost Live room, and it's so great to have you here. My name is Amy Amantea. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the associate director here at VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events and a proud member of this community. You bring joy to my Wednesday nights every time we get to spend time together. I want to acknowledge, as I do every time we're together, that we are broadcasting to you from the unceded and stolen territories of the Coast Salish peoples. That's the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations in particular. So I wanted to think about what my land acknowledgement was going to be this week, and we're going to be doing a little bit of historical Scottish stuff, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So I thought that maybe I would try and research what Indigenous life was like in Scotland. And I thought to myself, were there Indigenous people in Scotland? I actually have no idea. So I will read to you a little bit about what I learned. So unlike countries such as Canada, okay, that makes sense, Scotland doesn't use the word Indigenous in the same sort of contemporary political or legal way, but long before it was called Scotland, the land was home to ancient peoples with distinct languages, spiritual systems, government structures, and relationships to place. So I put together sort of just a little glimpse of the earliest known peoples of what's now known Scotland. And just so you know, these are in linear order, but of course there are big gaps between them because we could be here all night if I shared with you all of them. So the prehistoric peoples, so these are the Mesolithic and Neolithic folks of Scotland. Timeline, you're looking at around 10,000 BCE, so before Christ, and onward. So after the last ice age, hunter-gatherers settled on the land. They lived in small kin-based communities. They hunted deer and other wild animals like bear. They fished rivers and the coast. They built extraordinary stone structures, which I thought was really interesting. They created ceremonial landscapes out of stone as well. They were deeply attuned to the land, sea, seasons, and the sky. The Picts, these folks, their timeline was roughly 300 to 900 CE. The Picts were a confederation of tribes in northern and eastern Scotland. They were known for intricately carved symbols on stones. And they did show some pictures of these when I was looking that up. And so it was a little bit like the Rosetta Stone. So think about it. The pictures that I was able to find were like a flat stone that was about as tall as the body. And it had intricate pictures on it that were some kind of form of language, like hieroglyphics, Rosetta Stone kind of idea, carved into the stone. So, so they were known for those kinds of intricately carved symbols on stones. They were also known for complex kinship systems, possibly based on the matriarch and the succession of the matriarch, skilled metalwork and artistry, fierce resistance to Roman invasion. The Romans called them Picti, which means the painted ones, and that's likely referring to body paint or tattoos. And then we've got the Gaels, so these are also known as the Scotti. Time frame was from around 500 CE. The Gaels migrated from Ireland and established the kingdom of, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Dal Riata in Western Scotland. They spoke early Gaelic and organized around clans and kinship ties. They brought poetic traditions and oral storytelling. They helped shape the cultural foundations of later Highland Scotland. Gaelic language and culture remain living traditions today. And then from around 800 CE, we introduced the Norse peoples. So the Norse settlers arrived particularly in Orkney and Shetland. They intermingled and traded and influenced governance and language. Northern Scotland became culturally hybrid, so the Gaelics and the Norse were woven together, so they intermingled, and created another rich cultural heritage that has roots that are into Scotland today. So that's up to, what did I say that was, 800 CE. For anybody who wants reference, the movie Braveheart, if anybody's seen the movie Braveheart, that's the 13th century. So specifically 1280 to 1305. So we're only at 800. So like, we could go on and on and on to modern day. So I just thought that's a little bit of interesting history for early Scottish peoples of Scotland, ancient peoples of Scotland, before we even get into the colonization of England and Scotland and all of the messy stuff in there. So we're gonna learn a little bit more about Scotland and Scottish tradition today, because it's a Wednesday and it's February 25th, 2026. And tonight we're proud to offer you our Almost Live event number 208. This is the Edinburgh City Walking Tour, the historical Royal High Street. So our special guest tonight is going to be our very own Ava Forsyth, who is our managing director here at VocalEye. So let's welcome in Ava. And we'll tell you why Ava's our special guest. Hi, Ava.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Hello, beautiful people.
How are you doing this evening?
Doing great. That was a
Doing great.
beautiful intro.
Thank you. I mean, I try and make things as specific as I can to what we're talking about, and I like to learn stuff. So,
It was firing my synapses. It was
right?
lovely. Yeah.
Everybody has every piece of land has people that came to it before
Hmm.
I came to it. So, yeah, and I have to say, as as problematic as maybe the actors or the movie is, Braveheart was one of my favorite movies.
Oh,
Um,
it's a classic.
I know. I can look back on some of the movies that I say were my favorite and go, okay, I understand why they're problematic today. Because things change, language changes, culture changes, things that were PC or thought to be PC at one time have changed, right? We learn different things. But I know what those things are. So I recognize that when I watch, movies that are 20, 30 years old. So I'm not naive about it, but still can say it was one of my favorites as a kid. Um, so, Ava, you have a special. Well, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself to folks, because they may have heard your name but not know your relationship to VocalEye,
So,
um, or a little bit about you as a human. So maybe
aw.
tell us a bit about who Ava is.
A little bit about. Well, hi everyone. I'm Ava Forsyth. She, her pronouns. So I am the managing director at VocalEye. So that typically means just like Lindsay behind the scenes, here to help steward the company from an administrative perspective. And it's been just an absolute blast getting to know the community and coming out to events and just being part of the amazing Vocal Eye realm, I think it's so incredible. And between our online, our in-person events, it's really quite special. I come from a long line of theater makers. So both my parents worked in theater. My mother currently is the head of administration for the Arts Club Theater. We've all worked in theater. I grew up on stages running around. My father ran the North Peace Cultural Center in Fort St. John, and it opened in 1990. So we were always in theaters. And I worked for Bard and the Beach for 15 years, and I was head of operations there for 10 plus years. And I fell in love with VocalEye, and Bard and VocalEye have worked so well for so many years. And VocalEye really helped Bard and the Beach establish and grow its access programs. And it became such a great anchor. And I really got to know some of the folks. And of course, Amy and I knew each other. And it just kind of grew from there. And so I've just been incredibly privileged. This company that I've long since admired. To have an opportunity to work with everyone that's involved has just been incredible. So that's me, just a theater kid, drama kid, right from the moment I was like out of my mother's arms. My mother used to literally, she was a box office attendant. She would bounce us as she was ripping tickets and taking people's money at the Vancouver Theatre Sports. My dad was a general manager at the Vancouver Theatre Sports in the 80s. He used to do work with all kinds of amazing improv work actors, Colin Mockery, you might know of.
Whose line is it anyway? Yeah.
Whose line is it anyway?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've put in our time in the Vancouver theater and across BC as well.
Yeah.
We were that very annoying family that were all in the production of Music Man in Kelowna, featured in the paper as the family who sings together. So
Oh my
it's
gosh, you're the modern day Von Trapp family.
it's very obnoxious. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh my gosh. The Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
All
So
right. Well, that's a really great theatrical family history. So thank you for
that's
sharing
right.
that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wiping away my tears as you talk about the VocalEye connection. That's really nice.
It's so true,
It's
though. It
really
really
nice. But you're here tonight for a very specific reason, not just to gush about VocalEye, but what's your connection to Scotland?
Well, I am Scottish, Forsyth. It runs in my veins. My father's side, we've always known we were Scottish. We have Bruce's and we have Allen's, and the Forsyth is very, very strong. But we didn't know a lot about our family, a lot of the details. And I particularly was very interested in my grandmother. So who was this woman that really birthed the Forsyths? So I had this feeling like I didn't know who this woman was, but I've always felt her essence. And it wasn't until my father recently did a deep dive with Ancestry. This isn't an ad for Ancestry.com, please. But he did the deep dive into his family past, and he actually found or my three times great grandmother, who is basically our main link. So she was the one, and we discovered that she was actually born in India and had to go to Scotland. So we didn't. We just this then set us on an amazing adventure. We're just at the beginning of this adventure as we discover more and more. But this was the key. So we discovered who my four times great grandfather was
Wow.
through this process.
So this is what we're gonna do tonight, friends. We are gonna take this Edinburgh City walking tour of the Royal High Street, which is a recording with some photos, a lot of Scottish accents, and then we're gonna pause in between some of these recordings and talk to Ava about a little bit of what she's discovered about her family ancestry. I think it's fascinating that your three times great grandmother was born in India,
Yeah.
because when I look at you, you don't have any recognition of like visibly of being born
Right.
in India, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm sure there's going to be some interesting stories that come through there. So why don't we get started with our first introduction to the walking tour, and then each of these little walking tour sections are about 5 minutes long, and we'll come back and we'll chat with you in between and talk about family stuff and Scottish stuff and
So it's
all
great.
sorts of fun things. Yeah.
I'm so grateful. Thank you all for indulging me this evening.
Awesome.
This is lovely.
Well, it's a great time for community to get to know the VocalEye team too. So I think it's great.
Absolutely.
All right. So Rick, we've got an image that you're going to bring up of our first walking video, walking tour audio. So I'll get you to bring that up, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and hit play on our first sense of the Royal City. What is this? The Royal City Mile. Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to the National Galleries of Scotland City Walking Tour. In this series, we'll journey along Edinburgh's Royal Mile, exploring stories and places connected to Scottish art in the National Galleries of Scotland. We'll also chat to local experts to to uncover hidden stories about the sites on this historic street and why they're still important today. At 219 High Street, you'll find the site of the original Dr. Elsie Maud Inglis Hospice, marked by a bronze plaque on the wall. On display at the Scottish National Portrait Gallery is a bronze portrait sculpture of Dr. Inglis by the internationally renowned Croatian sculptor Ivan Meštrović. She's depicted holding a book, her gaze focused on reading its pages. Created in 1918, the sculpture was presented to the Scottish nation by the Serbian government as a token of gratitude for Dr. Inglis' work with the Scottish Women's Hospital during the First World War. Who was Elsie Inglis, and how is she connected to the Royal Mile? Local Blue Badge guide Hannah Mackay-Tate tells us her fascinating story.
My name is Hannah Mackay-Tate, and I'm a Blue Badge guide in Edinburgh. I recently helped to run a series of walking tours about Dr. Elsie Inglis to raise funds for a statue in her memory. Elsie Inglis was born in India in 1864 to Harriet Thompson and John Inglis. Her father worked for the East India Company and the Indian Civil Service while India was still a British colony, and Elsie spent her youth there before returning to Edinburgh with her family as a teenager. Despite growing up in the Victorian era, when even wealthy women were excluded from higher education, Elsie was always interested in pursuing a medical career. With the unwavering support of her father, she even founded the Edinburgh College of Medicine for Women in 1889 to allow her and other women to become doctors. She was also a tireless suffrage campaigner. Her frustration with the poor standard of medical care available to women at the time was one of the factors that motivated her to become both a doctor and a women's rights activist. In 1914, Elsie's two passions came together to create the defining achievement of her career, the Scottish Women's Hospitals for Foreign Service. They're medical units funded by suffrage organisations and fully staffed with female medical professionals, served across Europe from France to Serbia during the First World War. They were brave and effective doctors and nurses, serving in dangerous war zones with great distinction. By the time of her death in November 1917, Dr. Inglis was so respected that she received a state funeral at St. Giles Cathedral, attended by members of the British and Serbian royal families. She was particularly dedicated to providing maternity care for women in poverty 50 years before the NHS made medical care available to everyone. In 1899, she founded a hospital called the George Square Nursing Home. It had just 7 beds and stood in George Square where the Crystal Macmillan building is today. But this more affluent area of the city wasn't the best place to serve the women who most needed care, and when the lease was up in 1904, they moved to 219 High Street in the heart of the then impoverished Old Town. It was known as the Hospice, but it was a hospital rather than a hospice in the modern sense. They worked with some of the city's poorest women, often waiving their fees or paying for patients to recuperate at the seaside away from the filthy conditions of the Old Town slums. As well as providing maternity care and covering women's health, they worked with children suffering from childhood diseases like polio. It was challenging work in a challenging environment, at a time before access to antibiotics, vaccines, or many of the effective treatments we have today. Although Dr. Inglis had become a national hero by the time of her death, her story began to fade from our collective memory. From 1925 to 1988, the Elsie Inglis Memorial Maternity Hospital at Abbey Hill kept her name in Edinburgh's public imagination, with generations of the city's babies born in Elsies. But look around our streets today and you'll find only small plaques celebrating her legacy. In recent years, there have been efforts to revive Elsie's legacy and celebrate her with a statue on the Royal Mile outside her former hospital. Incredibly, it would be the very first statue of a named woman in Edinburgh city centre.
Wow. That puts a little chill. When you listen to that, Ava, come on back in. Did that
It's
because you're talking about your 3 times great grandmother,
yeah.
right? Because you're interested in the matriarch of your family, and
It's
how fortuitous that this starts with an incredible woman of history.
absolutely. So this and interesting. So what I discovered was my 3 times great grandmother. Her name was Amy Amy. She used the middle name Serwin, and Fraser and Forsyth. So she was born in 1818 in northern India.
Wow.
And she, in about 1828, at about 10 years old, she was sent to Scotland. Um, and that journey would have taken between 4 to 6 months. And she was 10 years old.
And so India was a British colony then?
That's right.
Part of the British colony. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so her father was William Fraser.
Hmm.
And I have a photo of that, I believe, if Rick is able to pull that up. So, and he does bear a striking resemblance to my father and my brother, actually. So this is my great great great
So
great
is
grandfather
this an illustration or a painting or
painting.
it's a painting? Okay.
It's a painting.
Can you describe?
Yes. So this is a just so this is William Fraser, who was born in 1784. So in by the early, so he was as many, so a lot of the Highland gentry, as they were called, were often they had massive estates but very little money. And so many of the sons were sent to many of the Scottish sons were sent to India. So he entered into the service, the East India Company service in 1799.
Mm.
And by the early 1800s, he was stationed in Delhi. And he served as the assistant to the resident, and eventually he became the agent to the Governor General. So essentially, just right-hand man to the Governor General. So here he became very immersed in the Persian culture. So he learned Persian. He socialized within the elite circles. So in this painting, there is a contrast between his Scottish roots and his sort of new, as they called it, Mughal. So that was this would be a traditional. So in this painting, he is depicted in wearing, he's got a robe. Sorry, he's got almost like uh, so the color. So he's got a combination of sort of Scottish and Persian clothing that he's wearing. So he's got a traditional hat on top of his head. It's a sort of dark maroon color. He's quite young in this painting. I believe he would be in his early 20s. So this would, and he's wearing a partial Mughal attire. So he's got a traditional breasted top with lots of buttons. So this would have been Scottish, and then he's got a more traditional Persian sort of skirt at the bottom, and he's holding looks like to be it could be a map of some sort in his hand. So it depicts him in this photograph. It's really merging these two worlds of Scotland and India. And he was one of the few people, there's many, many stories of how he became completely embedded into the Indian culture. He spoke the language. He was really, really invested in the art of the time. So he commissioned many, many paintings. And these paintings have become part of what's called the Fraser album. So this is the historical record, essentially, of the Mughal in India. So this was the governing culture that existed before the British came, essentially. So this was the Mughal court was sort of fading, and the East India Company was becoming, sort of really took over. So it's this really interesting compare, this really kind of in this photo, it's really interesting to find it because he's got both sort of traditional clothing that he's wearing. And then eventually we from what we've read, he went fully traditional. So they believe he had several mistresses, but he had one that was called his Bibi, 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 who would have been basically his favored mistress. And her name was Amiban. And she gave birth to my grandmother. So Amiban was in a village in Rania near Delhi. And so she was described in one account as a Jat woman whose beauty was beyond compare. And so we believe her likeness in several paintings. And there's one in particular in the Fraser album that I believe Rick can pull up as well. So there we go, that's perfect. So on the left-hand side is a Jat woman we believe to be Amiban. She is wearing a long traditional red sari from her top, goes all the way near down to the bottom. And she has ornate jewelry on both sides of her. Sort of a head covering, and then jewelry that cascades down towards her front. And then beside her is a young child, again, also dressed in traditional Persian attire. And she's wearing a sort of orange, red type long headdress and sort of like sort of not quite a sari, not quite as long, but more of a flowing top, and then a sort of light blue skirt on the bottom. And she's in the background. And so this was a traditional. This would have been a painting in the Fraser album, which depicts everyday life at the time. So it was really quite fascinating to when I started this journey, and to just start to look through some of these paintings and realize that, oh my gosh, that must be, I don't know for certain, but I believe that young girl to be Amy. There would be
Wow.
there'd be no other child that would make sense to be in that photo. So
And this is a typical sort of village type scene with villagers and things like that. Um, would this be considered like a palatial village? With opulent, a richer kind of village, or a poorer shanty kind of village?
I believe it was a richer village
Yeah. Okay.
in Rania. It was a smaller village, but it would have been well known
Yeah.
as being a you know uh, a sort of a classic um,
Yeah.
a classic place. But it's yeah, it would have. I mean, it's meant to be. It's depending on who you would say is from their point of view, and certainly
Right.
think from a Scottish perspective, they would think that this was a little bit more rustic, but this was certainly, this was very culturally rich area,
I mean,
and
they all seem to be dressed very, they all seem to be very clean, right?
mhm.
Dressed very cleanly, and the dwellings are, I don't know whether they're like rock or sand or whatever, but it's like nothing is portrayed as like dirty or slummy, or like those air
No.
quotes catchwords
Mhm.
that sometimes we understand as old villages in these countries, right?
Yeah,
Um,
there were everything. Everyone was painted with a nobility.
yeah, yeah,
There's sort of a
that's
sense
a good word to use it. Yeah,
of grandeur and honesty
yeah.
and beauty in everything, and then surrounded by animals and sacred animals and cows and goats.
Yeah, yeah.
So it would have had a fair bit of
Right.
meaning. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is a good place to take a pause and check back in with our our Royal Mile walking tour, and then come back and revisit. Yeah?
Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Okay, Rick, why don't you bring up our next walking tour clip, and catch up on where we are.
St Giles Cathedral is located on the Royal Mile, a 10-minute walk from Edinburgh Castle. It's an Edinburgh landmark, which is depicted in countless views of the city in the National Galleries of Scotland collection. One of these is South View of St Giles, Edinburgh by R. Macpherson. Dated 1799, this etched and engraved print shows the cathedral face on, and we can see its distinctive crown spire. With the nearby tenements and commercial buildings included in the view, Macpherson's print gives us a sense of the bustling 18th century city. The cathedral's interior is no less spectacular. Dendrochronologist Dr. Coralie Mills tells us more about the wooden features found inside and her work to trace their origins.
Hello, my name is Coralie Mills and I'm a dendrochronologist, which means I study tree ring patterns in old timbers to work out their date and provenance. I've worked in Scotland for a long time and I've worked on many interesting buildings over that time, but perhaps one of the most exciting was the bell tower at St Giles Cathedral on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. The opportunity to work on this building came about through a research project I'm undertaking called the South East Scotland Oak Dendrochronology Project, which is supported by Historic Environment Scotland, and the main objective is to build up the native oak tree ring record for South East Scotland. This is quite a challenge because our timber record is dominated by imported timber, much of it from Scandinavia, and that is because Scotland was already very short of homegrown timber by the later medieval period. I started by drawing up a long list of potential candidate buildings that might have surviving historic timbers in them, and I went to visit many of them to investigate the timbers and see whether they might be suitable. From there, I created a short list of potential candidate buildings that I took samples from, and one of them was St Giles Cathedral. With the kind permission of the Kirk Session there, I was allowed to take a number of samples from the 5-storey timber frame that is inside the tower under the crown spire, which many of you will be familiar with. Samples were taken using a power drill with a special coring device attached, and this allows a very narrow cylinder of wood to be extracted from a beam. We took a number of such samples. Their surfaces were prepared, and then the tree ring widths were measured under a microscope as a sequence for each sample, and then compared with each other. They nearly all matched each other. They formed a very coherent group, and when their sequences were averaged together, that average record was then compared with reference data of known date and place. I was delighted to discover that this was indeed medieval oak and that it was native oak. The timber came from northeast Scotland, and the closest match was with the Great Hall at Darnaway Castle in Morayshire, at the heart of the Royal Forest of Darnaway, which used to supply many prestigious building projects in the later medieval period. The dates obtained from this analysis were really interesting too. I got felling dates of the winter of 1453 to 54 and the winter of 1459 to 1460, and these both fall within the reign of James II. And I think it's amazing now, every time I walk past St Giles Cathedral, to think of that amazing structure inside the tower that has survived for all these centuries and still has stories to tell.
A building that survived all these centuries and still has stories to tell. I love that. That feels like the end of a novel to me. Ava still has stories to tell. Where have we left off, Ava, with your family history?
Well, yes, we've left off with we've met William Fraser. So he comes to Scotland. He's there for a while. He becomes fully immersed. And he at some point he has he has a daughter and 2 sons. And there's kind of this is sort of heavily, it's a bit obscure in terms of how how wildly known it was that these were his children. But
Sorry, are these children with his BB?
his BB with Amiban, that's right.
Okay, because he could have many children.
He could have many children. These were the ones that we know of that were given, that we have names, we have
Right.
historical references for them. But certainly, yes, he could have had other mistresses.
Yeah.
But this was she was the only mistress that is depicted in the paintings,
Mm-hmm.
and she is named um, in the paintings as well. It was so it was all very scandalous. And so little Amy at 10 years old was sent to Scotland, and she arrived with the and lived with a family, so her last name became Young. She adopted the last name of Serwyn Young, so she knew she obviously she was still very, very connected to India, so she used the name Serwyn, and then Young, because this was the family that she lived with.
Mm-hmm.
And then she would have lived with that family until she was, I believe, 17 when and then she was married
Wow.
to John Forsyth.
Do you know why
Um,
she was sent to Scotland?
we don't.
Oh,
We
interesting.
don't know. Yeah, it's one of those mysteries that I'm hoping to uncover. Um, what the and how she would have traveled too. So it would have been a very perilous, very dangerous journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to understand if she would have had attendants, if she would have gone with someone. Um, at 10 years old, it
Yeah.
would have been a really, really scary, scary journey.
Yeah.
Um, but all the accounts of her is that she was a very lively and personable young woman. I found a book called The Scandals of Scotland. And in it, it mentions Amy, and it mentions her, sort of her cantankerous grandmother, who was who really did not, would not, she did not believe that this young girl was her relation. So
Mm.
she denied that for years and years and years. But there's many stories of Amy, uh, the recounting that she was, super, incredibly lively and all that she was quite exotic.
Hmm.
There is some unfortunate mentions of her as dark as a darky,
Mhm.
or olive skinned. Lots of othering, so lots of othering language being used to describe her, but was very liked by all the boys, I suppose you could say, because she married a very wealthy merchant, and they had anywhere from 8 to 10 children. And the same year she was married, her father was killed. So he was assassinated. He got involved in a local dispute between two brothers, and he was assassinated. Essentially, he was trying to resolve this. So he's getting himself involved.
Mm.
He was putting himself in the path. So it was so this is I just keep coming back to this idea of this, white man really trying to put himself into the culture and really way overstepping,
Yeah.
and it ultimately ending his life. So Amy stayed in Scotland and had oodles of children, outlived almost all of them. And then she was married a second time. I found another, I've not been able to find it since. But again, a very scandalous tale, that after 30 plus years with her husband, she just decided, hey, this is good. I'm gonna go. And she was found in a hotel with another man using his last name, and then they were subsequently married after that. So she would have probably been in her like 50s or something, or late 50s. So she was quite the amazing woman and lived till the turn of the century. She lived until 1900. So she would have been in her close to 80. So just a, so I, what I'm doing now is really starting to dive into what would that have experience been like? What would have been like in India at the time? What it would have been like in Scotland at the time? And putting a lot of my own sense of self, uh,
Yeah.
trying to put myself in her shoes as to how she would have navigated, um, being other and being a part of that sort of high society in Scotland. That was ultimately a lot of smoke and mirrors. These were
Yeah.
a lot of people talking big words, who were, very, very, very judgmental. Um, but I think she also met some really incredible people along the way. Certainly the people that brought her into their home and helped raise her. Uh, just a truly remarkable thing. And then the fact that she never forgot her Indian roots. So she kept the middle name Serwin. There's references to it in her, as I discovered her headstone. So it seems to have been always a part of her life. I did read somewhere that they believe she might have actually gone back to India potentially with some of her children. I haven't been able to actually confirm that. So that will be another part of the journey
Yeah.
of discovering this. So there's
Wait.
certainly, I know a little bit, quite a bit. There's obviously a lot more information on her father. So
Yeah.
I have lots of information on his original um, house. It was what they call a bungalow, kind of
Hmm.
a mansion, but it exists today. So it's
In
William
Scotland or in India?
in India.
In India. Okay.
It's a very white classic uh, building, and I believe it's part of the Delhi train network. It's sort of
Mm.
a government building. They do have You can do tours, but I believe they shut it down, especially during pandemic. It might be out back open now. But yeah, to actually be able, and it was a bit of a scary, bit of a scary building because um, they had cells in the bottom, so they'd hold prisoners, and then there was sort of like a chute that would go out to the water.
Oh,
So
fun.
just yeah, so you can imagine that some not so great things took place there, but it was his home. It was his actual
Yeah.
sort of palace residence that he lived at. So it still exists today. So there's still quite
Have
a
you
bit.
been there?
I haven't. It's definitely on the bucket list for sure. My brother has been to India, but this was sort of before we really knew this
Hmm.
connection.
Hmm.
So our hope is to go back there and see what we can discover for sure. So this
That's pretty incredible stuff.
incredible.
When you think about all the little details that, like all the little gaps,
All the
right?
gaps.
And you know that there's probably like in anybody's life, like nobody could ever go back
Absolutely.
and fill in all the little gaps of my life either.
Hmm.
Um, Even with the internet.
Hmm.
Like it's just there's all these little gaps, and this reminds me of the theatrical concert that we just saw Adrian Glenn perform. You're Just a Place That I Know, which we saw at the Olympic stage at the BMO Theater Center, and also here on Almost Live. It's been recorded, so if you go back, I think to November or something, it's there. Um, because it's about his grandparents' journey in Ukraine, and he says, just like you've just said, is like, I don't know if all of these things are true, but this is my sort of impression of like what it would have been like for them to meet for the first time, right? Because he knew his grandfather, for example, danced for the troops.
Yeah.
And so, perhaps my grandparents met in this way. I wrote a song about it, right? So, like you said, he kind of had to interject his own guesses as to how this happened, given like the circumstances and the date of where they were in time, and a little bit of what he knew about their life together as he was a kid and all those kinds of things. So you're piecing those things together too, because there's only so much.
Well, we're all human, right?
Yeah,
We would behave in similar ways, whether, it's 2026 or it's, 1906 or
yeah,
1706. So, these family and struggle and challenge, these are all things that we know we all can feel. And so you
yeah,
can put yourself back in your ancestors' shoes, as it were,
yeah,
and think about how would that have affected me? How would I have, you know, what I have done? How would I have moved forward?
yeah,
And yeah, it's very much her journey is this young girl's journey, and to become this matriarch of my family. Without her, I would not be here. I really,
yeah.
absolutely, she gave birth to my great great grandfather, gave birth to my great grandfather, and then and
Yeah,
then my grandfather. So it's these, this, the matriarchs that are often suffering, often have these extraordinary journeys, especially in the beginning of their lives when they're teenagers still, and then
yeah,
having to have these, take care of huge families, and so many stories of that, of struggle.
yeah.
And yeah, it's just remarkable. And it's very interesting, the dynamic between, as I'm discovering, the male sort of, who is the well-known, he was this looming big figure. But she wouldn't have known that he was her father.
Right, because
So
she left at 10.
she left at 10, and there was a lot of doubt, and so it would have been
Yeah.
something she would have she eventually did know, because she had the last name, but it would have been, and then for her story to be kind of forgotten,
Hmm.
because she's just not name's not not associated in this big way. But what an impact she had, what a direct impact she had on me. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's been just kind of holding those two things.
yeah,
Uh, it has been really quite remarkable in the life of women,
yeah,
and the role that they play.
yeah. Yeah, the fascinating questions would be, how does she get to Scotland?
Mhm.
Like, why? Why do you
Yeah.
send a 10-year-old to Scotland?
Yeah.
Is it for danger? Was she sold? Like, we have no idea, right? Like, how do you, what prompts you to send a 10-year-old to Scotland? And who are the youngs?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Who are
Yeah.
they? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you don't just send a 10-year-old.
No, on their
Obviously, that
own.
was arranged somehow.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, there's so many
Hmm.
questions. Oh my gosh.
My theory is that her mother was a ferocious, extremely intelligent woman,
Mm,
and that she would have championed that, and would have known that the only way for her daughter to succeed and to have become to be accepted in the landed gentry and the aristocracy was to have gone to
mm,
Scotland as young as possible, so that she could be fully immersed and learn the language, and there never be any doubt. So my theory is that it was her mother that really was saying, you can do this, and because yeah, she
yeah,
just, so Amiban is the link for me, that in India, that I really want to do more research on,
yeah,
because I think her life is extremely powerful, and again, one that often goes, is sort of a footnote in history, as it
mm-hmm,
were.
mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that she's an incredible glue. So it's for me, I want to really dig into what her life was, and I think that might then help me understand Amy more as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Is there more, or shall we
That's
wait
it.
until that's
That's the
it?
end of my story.
That's the end of my story. Well, you're going to come back after the rest of the walking tour, and we'll do a little Q&A with our audience. They may have questions for you. They may have questions about the walking tour. So I say we proceed, and we come back and see you in a bit, about 15
Huzzah.
minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Sounds good.
friend.
Thank you, friend.
All right, Rick, it's your turn now to hit play on the next section of our walking tour.
John Duncan is well represented in the National Galleries of Scotland collection. He was a prominent figure in the late 19th and early 20th century Scottish Celtic revival movement, which looked to ancient Scottish history and culture to inspire artworks across various art and design disciplines. One of Duncan's most famous paintings, St Bride, can be found at the Scottish National Gallery on Princes Street, not too far from here. A less well-known work of his, The Witch's Well, can be found on the Royal Mile at Castlehill, on the west-facing wall of the Tartan Weaving Mill. Commissioned by town planner Sir Patrick Geddes in 1894, the well is a drinking fountain which commemorates the women and men executed nearby after being found guilty of witchcraft. The centre of the plaque features the dates 1479 and 1722 in Roman numerals on the top left and bottom right corners. These are the main years in which the persecutions took place. The fountain's symbolic design is typical of Duncan's style and interest in spiritualism. This can be seen in the imagery of the snake and the witches, which symbolise both perspectives of those involved in the trials, and the conflict between whose side represented good or evil. The text above was a later addition to the well in 1912. Claire Mitchell QC and author Zoe Venditozzi, who co-host the Witches of Scotland podcast, explain the context of the Witches' Well and their particular interest in it.
Hello, my name is Zoe Venditozzi and I am one of the co-campaigners for the Witches of Scotland campaign.
I am Claire Mitchell QC, founder and co-campaigner with Zoe Venditozzi of the Witches of Scotland campaign. We have 3 aims. The first aim is to get a formal apology for those that were accused of witchcraft, and we're delighted to see that on International Women's Day 2022, Nicola Sturgeon gave that apology. The second aim is to legislate to pardon those that were convicted, and that work's ongoing. And the third aim is to obtain a national monument. The idea for Witches of Scotland came to me, in fact, when I was standing in Princes Street Gardens, thinking about the well which was up above and the esplanade. And I was thinking about what the well said, and the well described the people that had been killed as witches and said that some people used their powers for good and some people used their powers for evil. And I thought that although that did mark the spot where women and men were killed as witches, what it didn't do is properly reflect the fact that these weren't witches, they were people, and that they died in a terrible miscarriage of justice.
One of the things that we'd really like to see happen is have a memorial that is really engaging and helps to not only mark the people that were accused and executed for witchcraft in Scotland during these terrible times, but also lets people know that there's more to learn about it and about Scotland's history more generally. So we'd like to see something that's much more imaginative and much truer and much more faithful to what actually happened in these times.
We would like something which would make people think about their history in a much more deep way and make people engage with the idea of the history of Scotland. Edinburgh is absolutely steeped in the history of Scotland, but one thing it does leave out to a great extent is the history of women. And we think by putting a memorial in Scotland to the history of women, which is unfortunately also the history of witchcraft, we would be doing a great service to let people remember what happened to these people so that it never happens again.
We think we've got a really great opportunity in Scotland because we've got such a strong art scene. There are so many fantastic artists that are from Scotland or are based in Scotland who could create something really thought-provoking and something that would really start a conversation about what happened and also about current issues that are linked to what happened in those days. So we'd like to see something that's really unusual, maybe not even necessarily a statue, just something that is there and that is thoughtful and is going to make people connect with what actually happened.
The fact is that the Castle Esplanade, although it is where those people died, it doesn't properly represent what happened to those people. And that's why we think it's important that we properly reflect our history in public spaces, to have a memorial which calls people witches, to say that some used their powers for good and some used their powers for evil, fundamentally misunderstands what the Scottish witch trials were about. They were about innocent people who were swept up in witchcraft accusations, a literal witch hunt, where people lost their lives. And we think it would be important to properly record that as a terrible miscarriage of justice, rather than having what Duncan's Well has at the moment, which seems to suggest that what happened was witches really were killed there and that some of them deserved their fate.
Facing opposite St Giles Cathedral is the site of the Luckenbooths shop, which was once Edinburgh's retail hub. Over centuries, the location of the Luckenbooths shifted as the crowded high street was developed, from the centre of the street, as described in Walter Scott's Heart of Midlothian of 1818. William Donaldson Clark captured this type of shop in his photograph titled High Street, which serves as a record of the businesses on the street during the mid-19th century. Donaldson Clark was an amateur photographer who used his knowledge of chemistry from his trade as a cotton cloth printer to document locations around Edinburgh. Local historian Andy Arthur explores the site of the Luckenbooths through the years, explaining how Old Town commerce has changed since the 15th century.
Hello, my name is Andy Arthur and I write a website of local history threads called threadinborough.scot. A history thread takes an object, say an old photograph, and follows the thread of its subject matter through the references, trying to tell its story and maybe turning up a few interesting facts along the way. If you had been standing here 250 years ago, you would not have been able to see much of the city chambers in front of you. This is because you would have been in a narrow, dark lane between the High Kirk of St Giles and a tall block of buildings called the Luckenbooths, looking down a forbidding passageway called the Stinking Stile. The word Luckenbooth comes from the Scots word lucken, meaning locked, and the medieval word booth, for a covered stall or shop. These were lockable shops. When the first wooden structures were built here in 1440, they were known as the Booth Raw, the row of shops. The word Luckenbooth was in use by the 1520s, and these were probably the first permanent shops in the city, if not in Scotland. They had lockable shutters that could be unfolded to form an upper canopy and a lower counter. This suited artisans and craftsmen in need of a covered workspace and a safe place to store their goods. Over the next couple of hundred years, they evolved into a row of 7 tenements of varying heights, which almost totally filled the high street, narrowing it to a width of only 14 feet. The Luckenbooths housed a whole range of businesses. The city's earliest postal directory, published here by Peter Williamson in 1773, records, amongst other occupations, a haberdasher, a jeweller, tailor, barber, vintner, shoemaker, watchmaker, and so on and so forth. Probably the most famous Luckenbooth resident was the poet Allan Ramsay, who opened his shop and Scotland's first circulating library here on the first floor in 1725. He had over 30,000 titles available, and his establishment was the hangout for Edinburgh's literati in the 18th century. In the aftermath of the Jacobite rebellion of 1745, the city began planning for its future. The same civic improvement schemes which gave us the new town and the North Bridge would also give us the Royal Exchange. This was the building in front of you, which is now the city chambers. It was commissioned in 1753 as a modern centre for commerce in the city. The Exchange was opened in 1760, and at its heart was a courtyard, surrounded by a piazza in which the merchants could walk and talk. There were 3 different coffee houses in which they could meet, and 10 shops facing onto the high street. 6 were set within the arches of the piazza's south colonnade, and these are what you can see in Clark's photo. In 1773, there was a toy shop, a milliner, a saddler, a china merchant, and a shoemaker. When the upper classes of the city began to migrate from the old to the new town in the late 18th century, the Luckenbooth's position as the retail centre began to wane, and entrepreneurial shopkeepers began to move their premises to the new town to be closer to their customers. By the 1810s, the Luckenbooths were said to be a shadow of their former selves and the haunt of mere trinket and toy sellers. The town council, wanting to open up the high street to traffic and daylight and to reclaim St Giles from the shadows, had the Luckenbooths and the old Tolbooth demolished in 1817. With the city needing an ever larger administrative body, and the town council having demolished many of its old meeting chambers, the solution of the half-empty Royal Exchange presented itself. They began to occupy it in 1811 and spent the next 90 or so years transforming it into the city chambers, buying up the various privately owned parts as they became available, including the shops in the photograph. These were demolished in 1901 and replaced with the visually similar but open colonnade that you can see today, to give a more dignified and ornamental approach befitting its status.
Bailie Fyfe's Close can be found at 107 High Street, through the archway under the low oval-shaped window. The building that stands at this location today was built in the late 19th century after the original 17th century building collapsed. David Allen's A View of the High Street from the Netherbow captures this part of the Royal Mile as it once was. The street scene faces west towards St Giles, with the old Bailie Fyfe's Close building about halfway up on the right-hand side. Bailie Fyfe's Close appears on the right of the image, just past the square Netherbow wellhead. This etching gives us a real sense of life on the Royal Mile in the 18th century. In the foreground, the shop signs tell us about the trades of the time. A wigmaker's next to a bookseller, and a shoemaker. Horse-drawn carriages are transporting people up and down the Royal Mile, and day-to-day business is being conducted by the people seen dotted around the image. Writer Dermot Mogg investigates the residents of Bailie Fyfe's Close over the years and how they lived.
I'm Dermot Mogg, a researcher and writer here in Edinburgh. I'm interested in the stories of ordinary people who lived their lives in the places where we live today, and I spend a lot of time writing about them, mostly using stories I find in old newspapers. You can find out a lot about people in the past from the newspaper archives and about the places they lived, and I often search the old papers for mention of the addresses of tenements that have caught my eye to see what stories I can find about people who lived there. Bailie Fyfe's Close is an interesting example. On the surface, it's one of the less remarkable closes on Edinburgh's High Street. A close is what we call the steep alleys that branch off either side of the street. Originally, they were densely lined with high houses and tenements. Some of them still are. A lot of them are named simply after people who happened to have a house there at a certain time. This one is named after Gilbert Fyfe. The only thing we know about him is that he was a merchant who lived here in the 1670s and served 3 terms as a bailie, which is a sort of council official. These days, Bailie Fyfe's Close is a short lane that leads to the back of the single tenement that was built in 1902 after the crumbling ancient slums of the High Street were demolished. The old newspapers record a few moments from the lives of people who lived here in the years after the new building's construction, many of them, of course, quite sad. In 1917, we find Catherine Devine, a 10-year-old girl, the daughter of an army sergeant living here, who was taken to hospital with terrible burns after her clothes caught fire in her kitchen, and she died 3 days later. For years after, on the anniversary of her death, a memorial notice was placed in the Evening News, which read, "In loving memory of our dear daughter Catherine, Mother misses you most of all, because she loved you best." And of course, like most closes in the High Street, Bailie Fyfe's Close had once been home to Scotch gentry. In the 1820s, there was Miss Nicky Murray, sister of the Earl of Mansfield, who acted as mistress of ceremonies in Edinburgh's high society dancing hall in Old Assembly Close, where nightly she oversaw proceedings from a kind of throne on a raised platform. Young debutantes from the country would visit her house at the top of Bailie Fyfe's Close to receive training in fashion and deportment. And finally, just a bit further back in time, the Close was the home of Nathaniel Gow, the son of the most famous Scottish fiddle player of the 1700s, Neil Gow. Nathaniel wrote more than 200 fiddle tunes and was the leader of many bands. He played for King George IV during his visit to Scotland in 1822. Nathaniel's best-known composition, Caller Heron, takes its melody from the traditional call of the New Haven fishwives that he would have heard as they sold their herring from door to door down the close. Of course, there was no recording equipment back then, so this fiddle tune is a unique record of the voices of those women and the sound of this very street. I've always been aware of the fact that in an old city like Edinburgh, the places we live in and the streets we move through have been home to generations of people before us, people who were here and have now gone, just as we'll be gone someday with someone else living where we live. It's maybe a melancholy idea, but I like the thought of us all handing on these places to each other down through the decades and centuries. Because that chain of people is permanent, even if each link on it is temporary.
In the 18th and 19th centuries, Edinburgh had a number of theatres. Several Scottish artists started their careers as scenic painters for playhouses in Scotland and beyond, including Alexander Naismith and David Roberts. Old Playhouse Close, which can be found under the archway at 196 Canongate, was once home to the short-lived Canongate Theatre of 1746 to 1786. This photograph captures the close from the inside, looking towards the archway, out to the Royal Mile, over to the baker's shop opposite. The narrow composition gives us the sense of what entering the close at the time of the Canongate Theatre may have been like, bustling with performers and audience members. Both the photographer and the date of the photograph are unknown, adding a layer of mystery to this claustrophobic image. Exhibition designer and model maker Stuart Smith Gordon explores Edinburgh's early theatres and what it would have been like to attend a play at the Canongate Theatre.
My name is Stuart Smith Gordon and I'm a theatre illustrator, model maker at Ice Cream at the Interval. I've always been fascinated by theatre and theatre spaces from a young age. Theatre and performance is such an important pillar of Edinburgh, and it's really woven into its DNA throughout history, long before the festivals. Theatre and performance is such an important pillar of Edinburgh, and it's really woven into its DNA throughout history, long before the festivals. Many of us have experienced walking into a theatre through those dark thresholds and entering that world of escapism and imagination. It's really magical. These theatres should really be celebrated in the work of the incredible architects, artists and makers who've crafted them. These artworks and decorations were seen as ephemeral and would be updated due to gaslight damage or tobacco smoke and changing fashions, which has left them really vulnerable to loss. In my work, I'm particularly interested in lost theatres and theatres that have been demolished or suffered fire damage. The evidence and archiving of these spaces is really fragmented and limited and requires looking at more unconventional sources such as newspaper articles, accounts, reviews, playbills, as well as early photography and etchings. There's a real worry that these spaces will fade from history and memory. It's thought that Edinburgh's first attempt to establish a public theatre was in 1736 by poet and painter Allan Ramsay. He'd rented a tenement at the foot of Crubber's Close, just off the Royal Mile, and had fitted it out as a performance space. Its early Georgian aesthetic would most likely have featured timber panelling, some painted walls, with simple wooden chairs and benches. The grand opening was on the 8th of November, with The Recruiting Officer as the main piece, a popular play at the time that followed the social and sexual exploits of two officers, the womanising plume and the cowardly brazen. But the theatrical venture was doomed from the opening. 2 years earlier, the Church and Town Council had introduced the Licensing Act of June 1737, which forbade all stage plays outside Westminster. However, Edinburgh prevailed and further attempts to set up public theatre continued. One such significant theatre was the Canongate Theatre or Concert Hall, located in Old Playhouse Court. The exact location of the theatre was discovered using the description given in a lease and comparing it with architectural drawings from the Canongate Kilwinning Lodge of 1927. Entering the court today off the busy, noisy Royal Mile through this narrow and gloomy alley, we find an escape in this quiet spot. This feels like a theatrical experience in itself, not dissimilar to walking through from a foyer into an auditorium today. The theatre sat behind an early 17th century tenement on either side of the entrance. It suggested that it was small and it held an audience of around 70, measuring 9 by 5 metres and had 2 floors forming part of a gallery on 3 sides. Evidence suggests that the scenery had to be simple and compact given the size of the space, which was revealed in a letter by the scenic painter William Delacour. The scenery would feature front scenes such as towns, chambers, forests, and the theatre opened on Monday the 16th of November 1747 with the play Hamlet. Theatre ushers of today talk about standing in an empty auditorium and almost feeling and hearing that applause from an audience. And standing in this close today, you can really feel the sound of an actor warming up through an open window, or the applause from an audience. The theatre was a great success and it ran performances of all the important plays. Theatre manners and talking through performances were a problem historically when at a performance of High Life Below the Stairs, Mr. Love, one of the management, walked onto the stage and read a letter warning the audience to be on their best behaviour. Traditionally, attendees would have housed their servants and footmen in the balcony and could be quite disruptive, and as soon as the performance began, it is quoted, a prodigious noise was heard from that quarter. They were ordered to be silent, but without any success, and after some force, including the use of swords from their masters and the audience too, they were evicted from the theatre. Swords have been replaced with ushers and torches today to expel unruly audience members, which I have to say I do prefer. We may not have etchings or photographic evidence today of that original theatre interior, but standing in the close today, you can feel its history, its presence, and the faint applause from the past.
All right, friends, that was the conclusion of our Royal City walking tour of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. I kind of enjoyed that. I wish that they had more episodes published, but that's what we got. So I'm going to welcome Ava back if she's still around as our special guest this evening. And Ava, how was that for you? Having been in Scotland, I have not been to Scotland. Were you on the Royal Mile? Did you get to visit that when you were there?
We did the Edinburgh Castle, and so we were around, but it was really one day
Yeah.
that I did there. We were on the hunt for some dead relatives. So we were we were heading up north. We went to up to Inverness, and so we were I only got to spend a couple of days. Really one day in Edinburgh itself. It's an extraordinary, beautiful city, and it feels like it's one of the few places where you truly feel like you're stepping back in time.
Yeah.
It's, just I haven't been to Bath, but I'd imagine that's probably the only other sort of city or where you just feel like you're totally immersed in history. And I think for me, what was so just striking about Edinburgh was there was a lot, like, because you visit the castle and, hearing about the witches and hearing, the history of violence and how people were, how they had to live, and then how we remember them today, and how we're taking back history and honoring those who may not have had a voice at the time and giving them a voice today.
Yeah.
And so that's really what is resonating with me in a lot of what we just heard. How do we honor history, and how do we not rewrite it, but how do we, honor what was there, but also from our lens today, how do we maybe apologize or at least acknowledge what had happened,
or just understand
yeah.
from a position of science, or and I think about like Joan of Arc, for example. What was said about Joan of Arc, and Joan of Arc was probably in a place of a mental crisis of some kind, but she was considered all sorts of things, right, and condemned for all sorts of reasons.
Like a very, very young woman, a young girl who loved her country and loved her God and believed in in their independence and believed in her people, and how the victor will always rewrite you as the villain to suit their own ends.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of figures in history where we could say, persecution. You're like, we were talking about the othering earlier, and the things that you didn't understand. Considering that if somebody floats or sinks, or they're a witch or they're not, and it's like, oh my God, seriously? Like, how did we actually believe in things like that? We as a humanity, but there were things we didn't know as a humanity too. So it's an interesting thing about our history to be able to look back and acknowledge those things. And I am for certain that 100 years from now, people will look back at us today and go, why did they think such things? Why did they do such things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did we allow such internet slop to take over our
Yeah,
lives?
exactly. Yeah,
Affect
exactly. You
how we
got it.
view
You
each
got
other
it. Yeah.
and the world around us. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's wild.
I want to welcome folks to share reflections on the walking tour, or if you've been to Scotland or have Scotland ancestry and you have any stories you want to share, or any questions you might want to ask of Ava that she can either answer or wants to answer. It's up to her. Um, we'll make some space for that. Yeah. Ben, you're always first. You're so quick on the draw. Is there anybody else that wants to go first tonight? Just leaving space for that because Ben always goes first. He's just so fast. Oh, Megan's coming in. All right, come on in, Megan. Then we'll do you, Ben. I promise. Come on in, Megan.
Wow, that was amazing. Now, when I talked about the witches, were they condemned in Edinburgh Palace? I'm just wondering now, because I've been there and I didn't see where witches were condemned. I didn't see it.
Were they condemned in the palace?
Yes.
That's a good question.
The witch's well, it's located right outside the castle. They wouldn't have. They were on. I think that they would have been executed on Castlehill.
Oh, Castlehill.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. Well, they talked about, and the one thing they missed out, like I heard about the Bailie Fyfe's close and another close, Mary's close. I've been to that one, and I've been to that close, and man, was it amazing! But yeah, it was so amazing with the actors playing, all the narrow streets and all that stuff. I have a picture of it, but I have to send you. Well, hold on, maybe I can send you now. It was. It was oh sorry, somewhere in here somewhere, probably before, somewhere in here, it's in one of these pages, I don't know, but what I'll do is I'll send it to you and you recognize it. I might have seen them as well, but I do remember going to Edinburgh Palace. I might have walked past it. I think I might have walked past it. I think I did. I didn't really see it. Oh my god. Yeah, and it was actually a witches tour also.
Yeah.
There was.
Well, and I believe in Hollywood House, so the Hollywood Palace. There's a famous story of a witch or presumed witch who named Agnes, who was hunted by witch hunters, and she was imprisoned in the palace of Hollywood House and put on trial and tortured.
I didn't see that. I didn't see the prison part. I only saw the part where you know, the castle with the queen was situated along the table and all that stuff. It was really amazing. I find that Royal Mile one. Anyway, it's somewhere in the book, but it's really cool. Yeah, but I did not see that part in Hollywood House. I did not see it. I'm like, what the heck? I did not see it.
That's it, Megan. You got to go back.
Okay, yeah, I do. I need
just gotta go back.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Megan. Let's go to Kathy, and then we'll go to Richard.
Well, yeah, I'm really fascinated by the history and all of that. But I wanted to share a family story. My sister went, well, she got in touch with a cousin, second or third cousin over in Scotland. I've never met her, and she hadn't either. But anyway, she went to the UK, I think it was last summer or something like that anyway, and she managed to meet my cousin, third cousin. And my mom used to keep in touch with her mom or something like that, her mom or dad. But yeah, it's just really, you know, I haven't met a lot of my relatives over there, but But anyway, that was just, I just wanted to share that, that my sister had met this third cousin that I have. And I kept in touch with her a little bit by email a long time ago, or a few years ago. So,
Have you ever been, Kathy? Have you ever been?
No, I haven't.
I didn't know that you had Scottish roots.
Well, English and Scottish roots. Yeah, on my mom's side. It's on my mom's side. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Kathy. I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Richard, and then Rita, and then Ben.
Hi. This was very interesting, partly because Bill and I are doing a Scotland England holiday in June, and so that I thought that learning this history about the Royal Mile was fascinating because Edinburgh is actually our first stop, so it's going to be very exciting to see, to experience this and look for those things that were pointed out in the videos as well too, but. Bill does have some family connections in England or Scotland, he thinks. So I'm trying to encourage him to try to follow up with that because I think it would be neat to meet some relatives. I know on my side, if we were going to Belgium, I would look up some distant relatives there because the European connection to my Métis family history it goes back to Belgium.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really fascinating too, Richard.
Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. How long will you be in Scotland for?
So we'll be in Scotland only for 6 days. We're spending the bulk of our time in England, mainly around the London area, just to see stuff around there. But yeah, so we're only in Scotland like 5 full days actually, because we have the day we arrive and then 5 more full days, and then before we go to England.
Are you doing train, or are you doing train and plane?
Obviously plane to Scotland, and then all of our transportation after that is by train. So I actually just booked our train yesterday from Edinburgh to London, but we decided to do the LNER, the East Coast one, as opposed to the West Coast one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
We'll be excited to hear the highlights from that trip when you come back.
Yeah. I think the highlights will be will be like some. Well, I think I'm really looking forward to the Scottish part because we're going to go to the Western Highlands, partly because the Western Highlands tour includes the stopover at the castle where the Downton Abbey Christmas episode was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to come back with lots of stories, so I can't wait to hear those.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Who did I say was next? I think Rita and then Ben.
Okay. Okay, I have one historical comment and one question. Now, the historical comment is about at the time that your third 3 times great-grandmother was sent to England, it was customary for Anglo-Indian families to send their kids that were born in India, to send them home to go to school. So that was a common thing. The thing that's unusual about this girl is that she was not both, Scottish on both sides or Scottish and English, but she was Indian on one part.
Yeah.
So that's what's unusual about it. Yeah. But otherwise, it was a traditional thing to send the kids to school to the mother country kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
makes sense.
Maybe these young people were able to take her home with them or something, but she wouldn't have gone alone.
No.
She would have been sent with somebody, like
with
either a
family,
nurse or
children.
a family with other kids, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway,
that's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and
historically, that was what used to happen, but it's kind of unusual because she was part Indian.
Yeah, so she was afforded a certain amount of privileges, and the fact that it was only her, it was only she was
Not the
And not the
brothers?
boys.
her
Yeah.
boys, the
Oh,
boys weren't sent, and one of the boys
that's
had a
interesting.
more traditional Indian name. The other one his name was Charles Fraser. So
Hmm.
yeah, we don't know why the young boys weren't sent, but I mean
Okay.
they would have been probably, I guess, too young, but yeah, and the father would have died by then. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
okay.
right. And I think that's a great inroad for me to try to find some first, some accounts of what that journey would have been like. And like as you say, it was quite common, but understanding kind of what that would have maybe looked like
Right,
yeah,
right,
it's great.
exactly. Anyway, but this was really fascinating. Both the tour and your story, Ava,
Oh,
was
thank
really
you.
amazing.
Thank you so much.
So,
Thanks for letting
anyway,
me share.
oh yeah, it was great.
Mhm.
Anyway, now if you ever make, more inroads into your history, I hope you'll come back and tell us about it or something.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
yeah, that'd be
Yes,
great.
I have
Yeah.
yeah, my hope is to be able to have some sort of either a novel to come out of it or something to come out of it,
Mm,
play
hmm.
maybe, so I think, all these things are kind of
Right.
formulating in my mind, but yeah,
Okay. Okay.
thank
Now,
you.
I may have missed a piece of what they were saying. I'm not sure what the context is, but there was a certain point when they said that theater was forbidden except in Westminster. But what date was that? Did you guys notice when
Oh
when
gosh.
they were doing the tour and they
Yeah,
were
it was like
talking about theater?
the
Yeah,
last
they
video.
were talking about the last thing it was just before they talked about how noisy the theaters were and stuff like that. That's the particular uh, piece of information there. But I'm just wondering when theaters were forbidden. That's kind of weird. But except, of course, the only time I can think it would be forbidden would be like in the 1650s or something during the
Mhm.
Puritan Revolution
Yeah.
or something. That might
Yeah,
have been it.
I believe so. Yeah, it was about 150 years during
Yeah,
Presbyterian
yeah,
ones.
yeah, probably. But
Yeah.
I missed it. I was just wondering if maybe you guys had heard it, but you hadn't, I guess.
I didn't. Yeah, we
You
mean
I
we
didn't
heard
hear
it,
it.
I just didn't remember it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you guys recorded it, right? I can always go look at it again, listen to
Yeah,
it again
let's
or
just see here.
something.
I just asked the magical
Okay.
box that sits in front of me. Royal Mile, Edinburgh, in 1642, the English Parliament, under strong Puritan influence, officially closed theaters in England, Scotland. I need to forward it. Deeply Scotland. Why? Why? Let's see. Doesn't quite say why here, but the date was 1642. By 1649, the Parliament of Scotland formally condemned stage plays, calling them immoral and spiritually
Okay.
corrupting. There you go.
There you go.
Yikes.
Okay.
What were
Good
they
job,
putting on
Amy.
stage?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, the
Thanks
Church of
for the
Scotland
info.
strongly opposed
Yeah.
theatrical
Yeah.
performances.
Yeah.
There you
Okay.
go.
Thanks.
According to the
Okay.
good old Google machine. Thanks, Rita.
Right. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, thanks, friends. That was fantastic. I like these historical things where we get to learn and chat, and I don't know, makes my heart happy. So thanks for this, Ava. It's been really great having you share
Cool.
some more of you and your family and some context. And yeah, as Rita says, if you learn some more stuff, we'll have to do an Ava 2.0.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got a whole other Ukrainian side that is just as wacky and
Yeah, right?
but
Can you
this, yeah.
imagine?
But
That's
Wow.
this
just
for
awesome.
now was my journey, and yeah, thank you all for allowing me to share. Really appreciate it.
Makes me always wonder about my family history, but that's a I don't know, that's a Pandora box that I don't know that I can open.
Mm.
But one of these days, you never know. You never know.
You never know. If you feel that you're in a good place to be able to open those doors, the stories that come out of it, and the intersections in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the other thing. As I put myself in the shoes of my ancestors, I start to think about my own self and how I would,
Yeah.
how might I have behaved or how I might have dealt with those situations.
Yeah.
So many of us have so many stories of, especially coming to Canada and what that was like and how do you, a stranger in a strange land and it's just these and often we have our families that are part of these really critical moments in history and we have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my great grandfathers came in as an orphan and he was, one of the children that were brought over from England to
Yeah.
Canada. And so and there's a lot of folks that just have no history because of that as well, because their lineage comes from, from grandfathers and grandmothers that were orphans and sent to Canada to on their own. So so many amazing stories, and I welcome all of them and would love to hear more from everyone. I think these are great things for all of us to dive into and share.
There was a friend of mine that it's actually a friend of my dad, so he's quite a bit older than I am, but we were talking one night and he said something about his father, who's from India, and I had no idea that his family was Indian, like from India. And he said, he was asking his father one day about, their life and whatever. And his father said to him, "Oh yeah, I knew Gandhi. Gandhi and I were," and it's like, "You knew Gandhi?" Like, are you
Wow.
kidding me? You knew Gandhi? It's like, yeah, my dad used to hang out with Gandhi all the time. It's like, didn't mean anything to me as a kid because like these are stories he was told, but like it didn't mean anything to him because Gandhi wasn't a thing. But today Gandhi's a thing, but it's that kind of stuff that you think to yourself, are you kidding? Like that's not that far removed from today, but that's a big thing to like, what is it like to sit at a table as a kid with Gandhi? Like, I don't even know what that's like. Anyways, it blew my mind when he said that. And so casually too. He's just
So
like,
casual.
"Oh yeah, my dad and Gandhi knew each other." And it's like, what? Did that just fall out of your mouth? So anyways, I was flabbergasted, but yeah, it's a whole side of my family I know nothing about because my mom's adopted. So I have no concept of anything. So maybe one day I'll get her to spit in a tube and we'll find some stuff out. Ben, you're going to be our last question or comment tonight. So come on in.
Ava, how are you?
Ben, I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Well, I want to say you're doing an awesome job with
Oh,
everything that you're doing with the VocalEye community.
oh,
You're helping. You're doing an awesome job, as well as you, Amy.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
So now I'm gonna ask the really creatively awesome question, but it has two parts. One is are these little videos on a website that is not on YouTube?
Yes.
And the other question is what did you like about tonight's look back at this wonderful experience that you brought to VocalEye Almost Live?
Go ahead, Ava.
Oh, sure. Yes, and just answer your first question. Yes, as Amy said, yes, these are available. I believe we'll probably share that link in our follow-up email. And so I think, does it come from the National Edinburgh site?
It's the Royal Gallery of Scotland.
Royal Gallery, Scotland, wonderful. So, and yeah, I would say, I think tonight, just what's been really incredible for me is sort of hearing the stories of Scotland and these sort of how much that country is in my heart. You know, when I did visit Scotland, I felt immediately at ease. And I don't know if it's because Canadians and Scottish folks are just there's this kinship there. I can't explain it. Um, there's a kindness, but there's a sassiness, and there's a sense that that things have been difficult, but that joy and love triumphs. And I just get that whenever I'm around Scottish people, or when I was in Scotland, and just hearing the stories tonight, and as I kind of relay it to my own family history, and really the importance of bringing stories to light that may have faded from history. You know, we just so often have these snippets of historical facts, and we know the big players, and we know the kings, and we know the queens, but what about the everyday people? What about what was their experience like? And we as everyday people get to discover those stories, and I really think it's our responsibility to try to do so, and because all of us are worthy of having our story be told. And so it's just an opportunity for me to be able to tell the story of my ancestor, and hopefully bring her name forward as a really pivotal person, not only in my family's life, but also from a historical context. And the fact that her name is Amy and her name is Ava Forsyth, and often Amy and Ava, we get mixed up all the time, and to work with Amy, and we've just kind of developed this amazing friendship, and so yeah, there's just this sense of this beautiful girl that I'm just now starting to meet, and she's becoming real to me. So yeah, so Amy's become this beautiful presence in my life of someone from my past and someone from my present. So I love an Amy.
Well, I gotta say, I gotta say to you there, Ava, you rock. Thanks for bringing this wonderful experience of your presentation to the VocalEye community.
Thank you very much. Thank you for welcoming me.
Made our evening, and I just wanted to say good night to all of you.
Good night, Ben.
We'll see you in the next production.
That's a perfect way to say good night to folks.
Good night, everybody, including Rick.
Thanks, Ben. Ava, so great to have you join us as our special guest tonight. I'm going to find another way to get you in as a special guest for another thing.
I love it.
Yeah, we got Lindsay coming up as a special guest and some stuff. So I'm finding ways of bringing my favorite people into the space. So thanks for joining us tonight and sharing some stuff. And we've
got all of our amazing describers on stage and productions coming up. We've got Eileen and Golden Anniversaries, Donna Soares, and People's Places and Things at the Cultch. All of us here online, and so you can't turn around with it walking into a
VocalEye something.
Remember VocalEye? We're here. We're taking over.
We're like a big massive spider web, and we'll just catch
you.
We'll catch you. We also have all of our new dates. They're not released yet to the public, but we have all of our new dates for the next season in our calendar. So we know the exciting things that are happening, and we know how busy we are behind the scenes. So I'm hoping that people will be really tickled about our next season. So
both in person and online. In person in the next couple months. Some excellent, incredible productions are coming up.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
We got a thumbs up, a floating thumbs up for folks who didn't recognize the floating thumbs up. That was great. I love that. All right, my loves. We're gonna officially say goodbye to Ava. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And that'll be it for tonight. We'll see you back on March 11th.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.